Hello and welcome to the last session of today's stream of DotVVM virtual conference. We will be here tomorrow also, but today I want to share what's new in DotVVM 5, which is not released yet, but we are already working on some of the features you will find in this release. One of the improvements we want to make is to make something better than .vvm dynamic data, which is a library that can auto-generate user interface based on your data model. And also we have started working on a MAUI integration for .vvm application, so you will be able to run .vvm app in MAUI native multi-platform application, which can open some new interesting scenarios for hybrid applications. So let's look at .vvm dynamic data first. Please note that probably we will use a different name than dynamic data, because this name was basically took from ASP.NET Web Forms era, but we think that it doesn't express very well what this library actually do. So and if you have been using dynamic data, we don't want to break you up, so maybe we will keep dynamic data as is, and we will present this new improved version as a new name, probably something like Auto UI or something like that, because basically it auto generates user interface from your data model. Basically how it works, this library or these controls will look at your C# class that you have in your view model and try to figure out which fields should be displayed to the user and things like that. And of course, from just the type definition, it's not very easy to figure out most of the ways, but if you specify some additional metadata, then it can be quite easy. And there is a namespace called system.componentModel.DataAnnotations, which already provides a lot of attributes which you can use to provide metadata for properties in your view models. So for example, you can specify a label for the field and its description. So from this you can auto-generate the entire row in the form, because it's not only text box but also the label which describes what is the field for. Also, you can use display format, you can use various attributes to provide some styling hints. So this field is more important than the other fields, or for example, this field is required, so there should be some asterisk in the user interface. And these things can be done automatically using this approach. Also, sometimes when you are, for example, selecting something from the list, you can provide hints on how many items should be expected there, because if it's a small short list with 5 items, it may be useful to display radio buttons, but if there are 100 items, probably the user will need some kind of search experience. So we want to also extend these attributes to provide some UI hints for what control would be best for this selection or for this case. Also, the data models can express some interesting relationships. For example, if you are editing the address, there is a reference to a list of countries, because you will be selecting country from a list of countries. So in this case, we also are looking for some way how to indicate that this is related to some other data and to generate the user experience automatically. It would be great for CRUD applications, so if you are basically building an interface over the database which can insert, update, delete and select rows from some database tables, this tool can be very useful for you, because it can, by just defining the metadata for C# classes and for your data models, then you should be able to auto-generate most of the forms. And also we want to provide enough extensibility points, so if there is some special behavior, special button inside the form which can, for example, preload some data, then you will have an option to do this quite easily. So basically in the new version we are planning to have 3 controls. First is dynamic editor, which is basically a single field editor. So basically the input for this control is just the property in some C# class. And it will look at the type of the property and on its attributes, and it will figure out the best editor for this property. So basically that's very simple, and if you place 10 dynamic editors and just reference the properties, it should work, it should provide the form. Also, it can be because it can be quite complicated to make all the forms look like the same way, and probably in your applications you are using some CSS frameworks as a Bootstrap or some others, and they have special hierarchy of elements to build forms. So for example, there is some div with some CSS class, and inside there is a label, and then there is another div, and inside this div there is the editor control. And dynamic entity, basically it takes all the properties from the current data context, and it will try to render the form for the entire object. So basically you can pass a customer object there, and it will auto-generate the form for you. And because every CSS framework is using different hierarchy of the elements, we think that we can ship with some standardized dynamic entity implementations for Bootstrap or for other CSS frameworks as well. Or you can build your own, because we can provide some base class or some base implementation, and you can just change the hierarchy of elements and names of CSS classes and things like that. And not only for generating forms, also we are thinking about generating grid views. So if you want to use grid view, but you don't want to specify all the columns, you can use a special type of column which is called dynamic columns, and it will also look at the data context and figure out the columns automatically. So that's it. And also, before I go to this slide, I can show you the demo. So here I have the demo for dynamic editor, and as you can see, the dynamic editor, it will get just a property, and if it's string property, it will figure out that the best thing for editing this property is a text box. So if I look in the application, you will see that for string we have just a plain text box control. For integer, you can see there is a numeric up down, and if you also use some range attribute, also it will restrict the range into some bounds. Yeah, so from 0 to 10. I'm trying to navigate to the view model, but I have to find it here because my keyboard shortcut is not working for some reason. I don't know why. So let's see dynamic data. And we have dynamic editor view model, and here is my customer class. So you can see this is the string property, plain string, plain integer, and this is integer with range attribute, so it can even read the range and put it to the control, so the user will not be able to select the value outside of the range. There is a Boolean property for which dynamic data will figure out the best thing to edit Booleans is probably the checkbox. So I have a checkbox here. For date time, we will render input type date, so you can use the browser's built-in date time selector. We will also have an additional package for business pack, so it will use the business pack date time picker control, which can be also quite, it would fit the rest of your application if you are using business pack. So these final two controls are a bit more interesting, because I will skip this one, this GUID product ID, for a moment, and I will look at this. This is enum. So you can see we have enum with development and support items, and I have provided a display attribute and put some nicer names for this. If you want to localize your application, there is also a resource type, which can point out to a resx file, and resource name that will be then the key in the resource file. So if you want to use localization, it is possible, and DotVVM will respect that. But here you can see the combo box was generated automatically based on the enum. So it's very nice way how to work with enums. I remember that until now I was also doing collection with all the enum values and some strings. So now you can just annotate this enum with these display attributes, and the combo box will be rendered automatically for you. There is nothing, no collection in the view model for this. It's just auto-generated from the enum, which is very nice. And this product ID, there is one thing I like even more, and that's a convention-based configuration. Because sometimes it can be annoying to put all the attributes to all the properties in all objects. And in many applications, I'm trying to follow some conventions. So for example, if I'm referencing to customer, and I want you to select some customer from a list, the property name will probably be customer ID, or it will end with customer ID because it can be like created by customer ID, deleted by customer ID, and things like that. But the convention is that the property name always ends customer ID, and if it ends with customer ID, then it will be selector from the list of customers. And that's what we have here. So I'm in my .vvm startup, I am extending .vvm services with dynamic data, and I'm providing some configuration. And here I have property metadata rules, and I can say that for a property which is called product ID, I will use a selector of this type. And this type is also interested because it's a record, and basically it inherits from selector item of good, which means that the ID of the selected item is good. Yeah. So basically this selector item, it has only name and good. So there is the display name and there is the value of type good, and that's it. And I'm also implementing iSelector data provider, which is a service that is registered in dependency injection. And there is a method called getSelectorItems, and in this method I can provide the list of items from which I will be selecting. Of course, this is just an in-memory implementation. It returns a static list, but since it's a normal service class, I can use dependency injection here. So I can inject, for example, my DB context and load the product list from the database. Also, there is another version which can also take parameters. So if I need just some category of products, I can do that by basically adding another generic parameter here, the parameter type, and then I will get this parameter here, and I can use it to filter out some values. So it can be very useful, and basically when dynamic data sees that this is referencing to some selector class, like this product selector item, it will call this service to provide the items for this component. So it will render combo box, and it will allow me to select from the products. But this collection has to be backed up somewhere in the view model. So there is the only requirement that if I'm using this selector in my view model, I need to have selector view model of these items. It will find it automatically. It will browse the hierarchy of the view models and it will find this item automatically. But I need to have it here. I can just initialize it to a new object. It will load up automatically. I don't need to do anything, but still I need to declare this in the view model. So that's the only thing. If I'm selecting from products, I need to have the selector view model here, and all the magic is hidden in this class, but I need to declare it in my view model. So that's how the selectors work. And also, if you don't want to use these editor fields for individual properties, you can use the dynamic entity, which is here. And here we have an implementation of dynamic entity, which is using CSS framework Bulma. We didn't want to use C# Bootstrap for everything. So here we are using Bulma, but in principle, it's very similar. And if I look in the Bulma dynamic entity class, which I have to look for here, go to, so if I look at this class, you can see it inherits from dynamic entity base, and basically I'm overriding the get contents method, and basically I'm calling get properties to display, and for each property I will create this editor, add some CSS classes, and basically I'm using the composite control approach here, and I'm wrapping it in the div, add CSS class, and append it here. So if you look in this Bulma page, and if you look at the hierarchy of the elements we have here, so you can see div class field, inside there is div class control, and here is the text box, and around it there is field label, which is the person or company name, and that's it. So this hierarchy basically represents one form field in the page. So Bulma dynamic entity, it will go through all properties in the current data context, and it will render fields for each of the properties, and it will make sure the div hierarchy is here. And because there is a base class, you can implement your own version for your own hierarchy of CSS styles, and we will provide Bootstrap implementation and also some implementation in Business Pack, which will be probably using the Business Pack form item control we already have there. Yeah, so that's how this works. And also you can see that this form has 2 columns, and it's quite interesting because how to tell the control to render 2 columns. Well, it cannot render 2 columns, but you can use this control twice, and you can filter out properties you are interested in. So basically I have 2 columns here, and here I'm saying, okay, for this first column, render only properties which are in the group basic info. And here, in this second column, render properties from the column, contact info field group. Yeah, and if I look in the view model of my page, which is here, then you will see that I have marked my properties with the group name basic info. So this is the first column, and this is the second column. And also you can see I have an enum here, so I can select from email or telephone. Yeah, so it's here. Also, we have added an option to add some extra property. So if I go back here, we have property something, and you can bind it to some other expression. So if you, for example, want to add some calculated field or to put some fields outside of this address data context, you can, and the control will support this. Also, we are planning to add some hookups and extensibility points. For example, if you want to provide a custom editor for country ID, or for example, just want to place a button before the country ID editor, you can do this, and you can also use dynamic editor to render the actual editor here. Also, you can respond to changed events on some fields. So for example, when I change the country ID, I will reload the states using my states data provider service, and to get selector item, I'm passing address, so it will see the country, and based on the selected country, it will give me the list of the states. Yeah, so this is the kind of filtered selector service. It gets a parameter, and based on the value of the parameter, it will return some values. So for example, if I'm US here, so I can select from the US states. If I change it to Czech Republic, then the selector is empty, and there is also a logic that if there is nothing to select from, the field will just disappear. Yeah, so that's why the field has disappeared, but now it's loaded here again. Yeah, so this is the dynamic entity. I don't have a demo for dynamic columns, but basically it's another type of column in grid view. So we will put grid view in the page, and inside the columns we will put grid view dynamic columns, and it will render all the columns which you need. And also you can combine them with your own columns. So if you want to put some columns before the generated or after the generated columns, you will have the option to do that. So that's what we are planning for .vvm dynamic data. The good thing on this approach is that we are using composite control, and we are pre-compiling them. So one of the biggest problems of the old dynamic data implementation was that it was using too much reflection, and basically on every HTTP request it was browsing the reflection metadata and generating everything in the runtime. We want this to be pre-compiled, so when the application starts, it will pre-compile these controls, and then all subsequent HTTP requests should be quite quick. So these were selectors. We will probably be doing some renames. This slide also mentions the new names, not selector item, but selection, because there are also some conflict with other classes in the framework. So we are still working on this. It's not ready yet for trying out, but stay tuned because I'm really thrilled about this. It can be very useful if your application is not doing anything special. It's just text boxes over data in SQL database. So that's what will be better in the new version. As I mentioned, the better performance because of the pre-compilation. Another area we want to focus on is to provide a way of building hybrid applications. Basically, it's a web app that is running as a part of native app So for example, even if you have a mobile app, it can be this case, because you can just run a native mobile app, and within the app there will be a web browser control which can load some web stuff. A lot of applications are actually doing it. Some applications are only this web browser actually, because all of their user interface is done like this way. And you all know a lot of applications like, for example, Microsoft Teams or Visual Studio Code or Spotify. These are all web-based applications that only pretend they are native applications, but they can be installed and they can also touch the native features on each platform. So they have more features in general than the web versions, because the web version can only access the browser APIs. However, this native MAUI app can on each platform call native system API. And also, we want it to be able to communicate with the DotVVM app. So basically, we are using WebView 2 control on Windows and WebView on other platforms as well. And we have made an integration, so there is no HTTP communication at all. Basically, we will exchange data between WebView and the MAUI process in memory using some communication channels. So there is, it's not very resource intensive, and also we want to provide both way interaction between these two apps so they can communicate. So the MAUI app can detect what's going on in DotVVM app, and also DotVVM app can contact MAUI app, please do this native thing because I'm DotVVM, I'm in the web and I cannot do this myself, and also get the results later. So for example, DotVVM app can send notifications to the web view by calling this from a static command, and you can also pass arguments. So basically, and in the MAUI you can hook up for an event and you will get an event when DotVVM app calls this, so you can respond to that. And also the host app, the MAUI app, can also look what's going on in the .vvm app. So for example, it can look at its view model, it can get on which route the application currently is, it can patch the view model with some changes, so it can modify the view model from the outside, and also it can call named command you will declare in your page, for example. That's the current state. Maybe we will add more features to communicate together. So let's look how this works. And also, if you are wondering about some use cases, recently in my company we had a project that basically it was like a point of sale system, and it included some kind of reservations calendar because it was for some sport clubs. So basically when you came to the reception desk and say I want to book a tennis court for 2 hours, they were opening the calendar and making the reservation. And it was an application written in WPF because there were many more features than the reservation system, and they needed a native experience, so that's why the application was in WPF. On the other hand, they also wanted the web user interface for the reservations calendar, so basically we were building the same UI for the web in a different technology. We were using .vvm, but still WPF and web, even in .vvm, it's quite different. So there were two implementations. If we had this, we would be able to host the web version within the WPF app. Even using CSS, we would be able to make it look like the native experience. However, this wasn't on our mind at that time we were implementing that, so we ended with two implementations of a very similar user interface. And also, if you look at some Microsoft products, for example Outlook, if you are making a meeting and you want to use the room finder to find some free meeting room, you will see that this experience, the room finder, is also done like in a web version. They didn't do it natively, they are hosting web version. It's also the same in the web version of the Outlook because it's easier. If you have the experience on the web already, it's easier to reuse it in the desktop application. So let's look how this integration looks like. I will close some things here. And for here I have my MAUI application. I have to use the Visual Studio Preview because MAUI isn't working in the latest stable version yet, but in preview it works. And if you look in the MAUI programs, yes, I'm initializing MAUI. This is coming from the template, so not my business really. And here I'm calling builder at MAUI.vvm web view. And this will configure the .vvm application within the MAUI app. You can see I'm detecting the path here. Basically, I'm taking the location of the file and pointing to the hosted app directory, which is the directory in which my .vvm application resides. So I have a .vvm startup here, and I have my pages and my view models here. So you can see there is the page. We don't have the integration for MAUI projects yet, so the IntelliSense for .vvm is not working here, but we will of course provide that experience later. And also there is some www root. I needed some JS module, so also I have some static files here. This is not very interesting, it's just normal .vvm application. However, I'm integrating it in the .vvm MAUI. And here in the main page, I have some user experience which is done by MAUI controls. So I have a grid here. Here I have a route, two labels, which are basically displaying on which route I am in the .vvm application. So route and route name. And also I have three buttons here. One can get the actual view model state, one can patch the view model with some change, and one can call the named command in the app. And the last control here is .vvm web view, and basically it's a web view where you will say the name of the route and it will show the page for you. Also, I'm responding to page notification received, so if the .vvm app sends me notification, I can hook up to this event here. So for example, when I get the notification from .vvm application, I will just display an alert. This is a MAUI function that will display the alert. So I will just display this. But you can, of course, handle this as you wish. The buttons are very intuitive. Basically, I'm just calling getViewModelSnapshot function on the .vvm page control, which is my .vvm web view, and it will give me dynamic with the view model. So I'm serializing and then displaying it to the user. Then if I want to patch view model, I can say, okay, set value property in the view model to number 3. So you can even send changes to the view model in the individual pages. Of course, you have to be careful not to break things up. And also I can call the named command. This will change this API because here I have to pass some named command ID, which is internal and it can change in any time. So I will find some way how to pass, for example, CSS selector to the element that can access this view module or something else. Because if you are using view module in the markup control, you need to say in which markup control you want to invoke the named command. So this will be some CSS selector in the future. Right now I'm using internal module ID because it's a demo. And I'm calling the increment by named command and I'm passing some values to the command. So let's, this is the MAUI version. Let's look at the .vvm app. Basically, it's very simple. It's a simple counter. I have this counter value, write it printed out, and I have a button, and I'm calling the increment function in the view model, which basically increments this by 1. It's very easy. And here I have the named command increment by. It accepts one integer value and it will just increment the value by the specified number. So in my MAUI page I was passing 10, so it should increment by 10. And also there is a route link which is going to second page because I want to see that the MAUI app can detect that the route was changed to something else. And here is the last button in the .vvm app, which basically sends a notification to the page. So basically it can send there some hello and also some arguments. Here can be any number of arguments. I hope that this will work. If not, I will remove the argument, but it should work. I want to support any number of arguments you want to pass from .vvm to the MAUI. So let's run this. I'm using this on the slow machine and it's a preview version of everything in Visual Studio, so it's a bit slow. Of course, we will be making sure that this experience is a bit faster, but on the other hand, there are basically two applications in one process that have to initialize, so sometimes it can take more time. On the other hand, I think that in many use cases it won't be the problem. So you can see this is the MAUI app. It's showing me that I'm on the default route here, and also I have these three buttons. These purple buttons are MAUI buttons. Yeah? The .vvm application starts here with the hello. You can see I can select the text because it's just the web browser. This can be configured to disallow text selection, so it wouldn't look so bad. And here I can, the .vvm app is fully functional. I can increment the values here. I can get the view model state, so this is calling get view model snapshot, and it will return me the dynamic representing the view model state. So I'm just showing it serialized as JSON, but you will get dynamic, so you can interact with the properties directly. And also I can patch view model, so I can say set the value to number 3. I can click and you can see it has changed. And I can also call the named command, which will call the increment by function and pass 10 as a parameter. So now the counter, you see it's 13, now it's 23 and so on. So it's very easy, and I didn't break, everything works. When I go to a second page, you can see the binding. It was data bound from the same property in MAUI, so we can see this value change. When I go back, it's back to default. It should be two-way, so if I change here to second, the web view should navigate to the other route. There will also be some API to navigate to routes with some parameters. And when I call the send notification to host, it will trigger the event for me, so it will display MAUI alert because I have called the event that the web view was passing to me. So these applications can communicate in both ways. So MAUI app knows what's going on in the .vvm app, and .vvm app can send signals to MAUI app, oh, please do something, because I'm .vvm, I cannot do everything. And the difference here is that now this is not the client-server model. Everything here is on the client. So in your .vvm view models, here if you want to connect to the database would have to be local on the user's machine, because this is now not running on the server. It's running in the same process as the MAUI app, which also means that you can interact native functions of the client's machine here. So that's also a nice thing that you can have. But if you need to work with some data, you will need some API, and the view models will be calling these APIs. And you can share these APIs with the MAUI version of the application. So this is the way how you can create the hybrid applications with .vvm. Right now, this is in the experimental phase. We only have support for Windows, but in this implementation, there are folders, Android, iOS, and Mac Catalyst that are waiting for our implementation, and the web view control is similar on all the platforms. So I hope that we will be able to support all the platforms, at least on the tablet machines. I'm not sure about the mobile devices because of the performance reasons, but at least on the tablets it should work very well. So this is the MAUI integration of .vvm. I hope that you like it, and maybe you have figured out already some nice scenarios where you can use this. If you have any questions or any ideas what sample applications for MAUI and .vvm we can do, please send the ideas to the chat. We will be happy to create some hackathon or some live stream where we can build these experiences. We also have another plans for .vvm 5. One of them is to improve grid view dataset, because currently if you want to load data using static commands or REST API bindings, it's not very friendly. So we want to make sure this is more extensible. It will support better types of paging than just page index and page size. Some token-based paging, for example. It should support sorting by multiple columns, not just by one, and you will be able to plug your own parts in the grid view dataset. So that's what we are planning to improve. Also, we want to offer validation for static commands, because currently validation works only for normal commands, and you have to validate everything in static commands by yourself. So we want to make sure this is integrated. And also we would like to have integration of .vvm with other frameworks. We already have integration with React, so you can take a React component and place it in the .vvm page and it will work. You will see it tomorrow. But we also want to have integration with Svelte. We are already working on that, and it's in the preview version of .vvm, and also with other frameworks. So you will be able to host external controls in .vvm, make them access .vvm view model, and react to changes, respond to changes or events that these components are producing. So that this can enhance what you can achieve in .vvm. So if you have any questions, I will be watching the chat, so I will respond. Make sure that you write these questions there. And also, I hope that you will find DotVVM useful either for building new applications or to modernize web forms apps. And we will be here with you also tomorrow. So if you want to see Roslyn analyzers or validation enhancements in DotVVM 5 we are planning, or if you want to see the React integration or JS Directive and ML.NET, join us tomorrow. We are starting at 2 p.m. UTC. If you are in Central Europe, it's 4 p.m. If you are in the US, it's in the morning. In other parts of the world, it will probably not be in a very convenient time zone, but of course the recording will stay here on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe our .vvm channel so you will not miss out on any videos. We will then cut the live streams into individual sessions, so if you subscribe you will get notifications that the videos are ready. So if we are not in time zone convenient for you, we are sorry, but you can watch the recording, and of course if you post any comments under the video we will try to respond. So see you tomorrow. I hope that you like these sessions, and stay safe, take care, bye.